In lesson 2 of our series on guitar chords, we began our study of triads. And in this lesson, we're going to continue that study. Now, if you didn't see that video, I recommend going back and reviewing the details of what was covered. I'll leave a link in the description below. We concluded our study in lesson 2 by going through the process of actually finding major triads across the fretboard. And we ended up finding 25 ways to form the major triad. And we noted that when applying this to all 12 keys, that meant we actually now had 300 major triads at our disposal, which was pretty cool stuff. So now let's add on to what we learned in lesson 2 by showing how easy it is to take those 25 major triads and change them to minor triads, or diminished triads, and augmented triads. So look at the notes that make up a major chord. And in our example from lesson 2, we chose C, E, and G. If you look at those notes lengthwise on a guitar fretboard, you can easily see that from C to E is a major third interval. Remember, 4 frets. And from E to G is a minor third interval, 3 frets. And that combination is what makes it a major chord, or a major triad. Okay, here's how simple it is to change those major triads to minor, diminished, and augmented triads. Now, if I take that third scale degree, in this case E, and I lower it by a half step, that is, I make it flatted, it becomes an E flat. But notice what this does. It now gives us a minor third interval, which is a distance of 3 frets, and a major third interval, a distance of 4 frets. And you'll recall that this combination creates a minor chord. So to make a minor chord from a major chord, you simply flat the third. Now let's apply that to the guitar by looking at some of those 25 major triads that we learned in lesson 2 and changing them to minor triads. In our example of C major, I'm simply going to flat every E. Now let's just take a few of the different forms that we learned, of the 25 forms we learned, forming those major triads. So for example, let's say I went up here, a really cool sounding major triad. The E is right here, the third. All I have to do is flat it, and now I have a minor triad, a C minor triad. All right, let's go over here. We had this one. Well, the E is now the second note. I just have to flat it. And there is a C minor triad. It's just taking the E, or the third. Think of it as a third. We're just doing an E because we're doing a C major. But take the third and flat it. I could do it like this. Here's the third. And there is a really cool C minor triad. Or how about maybe this form? Okay, where's the E? So we flat it, and there's our C minor triad. How about this one? Here's the E, we'll flat it. So that's all we have to do is go back over our major triads that we found. Remember, we found some 25 or so. And then take the third and flat it. And it's as easy as that. Okay, now that we've seen how easy it is to find minor chords all over the fretboard, let's see how simple it is to find diminished chords. If I take my minor triad and I lower the 5th scale degree by a half step, well, in this case the G, it becomes a G flat. And again, notice what this does. It actually gives us a minor third interval, that distance of 3 frets, and another minor third interval, a distance of 3 frets. And by definition, that's a diminished chord. So let's look across the fretboard at a variety of diminished triads. Okay, let's take this for an example. Common major triad. Remember, I flatted the third to get a minor triad. And then I flat the 5th. This is a second inversion chord. Move that down. Now we have a very common diminished triad. And here's the root, the C. This is a C diminished. Let's do it again with another one of the 25 forms that we learned. All right, so say we take this one here. Here we have the root, the fifth, and the third. Remember, I want to flat the third and the fifth. I just move these two down. And that is a diminished triad. Here's the root, C diminished. Or let's say we tried this one up here. Same voicing. Now I take the fifth and the third and flat them. Or you can think of it as I'll flat the third and get my minor, and then flat the fifth and get my diminished. Let's take this triad. Here we have the fifth, the third, and the root. I want to take the third and flat it. There's my minor. And the fifth and flat it. There is a diminished triad. C diminished triad because I've got my root here. Okay. All right. Maybe let's try one more. How about this one? Really cool voicing. Well, once again, I just need to flat the fifth and the third. Here's the third. Here's the fifth. And that's a diminished triad. So again, it's simply a matter of taking our major triads and flatting the fifth and the third, or our minor triads and flatting the fifth. And that's how you get diminished triads. And using C as our root note, or the first scale degree, remember that gives us the notes C, E, and G. But to make it an augmented chord, all I have to do is to raise or sharp the fifth degree by a half step, and that gives me another major third interval plus the first major third interval. And that's an augmented chord. And again, we can go back over some of those major triad forms that we learned and change them to augmented chords by simply sharpening the fifth scale degree. So let's just find some major triads that we looked at in lesson number 2, and we'll raise the fifth. So here we go. This is one that we like. We have the root, the fifth, and the third. Let's just raise the fifth. Really cool sound. And then maybe let's go to this famous one again. And we want to sharp the fifth. Well, this is a second inversion triad where the fifth is as the root. So this is a C over G. So we're just going to augment it. It's really neat. Okay, let's try this one. Well, this is a root position triad. So the fifth is over here. Let's go ahead and raise it up. You can hear that very distinctive sound that an augmented chord makes. Let's try this one right here. Okay, we have root, third, fifth, whoops, and there is our augmented triad by simply sharping the fifth, raising it up a half step on the guitar. That's what sharp means. Take this one. And now to get that, I've got to raise this fifth. That is an interesting sounding chord. I like it. Another one of our favorites was this one. Remember this? This is our first inversion where we have the E, the C, and the G is up here. So now I'm going to raise the G because it's the fifth. Very cool sounding chord where C is the root. Cool. All right, so those are examples of how you take a simple major triad. We learned some 25 of them in lesson number 2. All we have to do is raise the fifth and we have another 25 augmented triads. That's as easy as it is to find an augmented triad. So if you think about what we've done, we've had some 25 major triads times 12 keys, that's 300 chords. We can easily find 25 minor triads by simply flatting the third of our major triads and there you go. Take that times 12 keys and you've got another 300 minor triads. You take the minor triad and you simply flat the 5th because you've already flatted the 3rd. And now you've got times 12 keys, another 300 of those. And here we go. Take the major triad, sharpen the 5th. We had 25 of those major triads. We simply sharp the 5th, take that times 12, and that's another 300 chords. 1,200 chords, believe it or not, that you could easily find just by working out those triads. Pretty cool. We're not quite done with this lesson. At this point, we've stayed with chords that are played on only 3 strings. But when you play a triad, you can repeat notes in that triad on different strings, adding notes an octave or even 2 octaves in distance. And of course, we can do that with all the triads that we've learned: major, minor, diminished, and augmented. Let's say, for example, I had this form. Well, I can add this string by finding a C, an E, or a G. Well, here's a C. I can take this string by finding a C, E, or a G. I can do it open as it's an E. I can add the G. Those are both C major triads. This string is an E, so I can do it, the whole thing. This is now a C over E, or a first inversion. If I put my finger here to play the G instead, I now have a second inversion major triad, but using all 6 strings, so this is a C over G. Really cool. Now I can really make a big chord. Or, remember this triad? Well, I've already got my G, my C, and my E. Remember, this is a second inversion triad. Well, if I put my finger down here, I've got a G. I've repeated the G, made it a little bit bigger. Here's a C. I can actually bar there. I've made it a little bit bigger. If I wanted to extend the bar up here, that's a G. That works. This would now become a second inversion because the G is the root, or a C over G. Or I can just leave it off and play a C and make it a root position. By the way, I've got these 3 fingers like this, but you can take your ring finger and bend it like this to cover those 3. It's another way to do it. I use my little finger sometimes to support my ring finger. And on. We can extend these and make them really cool. Here's a chord you don't often see. So, remember that one? We learned this one. This was the very first major triad that we learned. Well, we can add this note and this note, because we already did C and an E when we were playing this inversion. This is a major triad. That's kind of a cool sound. I can take this particular pattern, add the root, add a G, and then add another C. There's a big sounding C chord. So that's the idea. I want to make bigger chords by using more strings. You don't have to use all 6. You can use 4, or you can use 5, or you can use all 6 to form bigger sounding chords by simply repeating one of the notes in whatever chord you're forming, whether it's major, minor, or diminished or augmented, and making it bigger, increasing it by a note that's an octave away or even 2 octaves away. As you can see, the number of chord forms available to us just by forming triads across the fretboard on either 3 or more strings, it's immense. All right, but you might be asking questions like, but what's the value in that? Or how can I actually use this information in music, in songs? And that is what I'll introduce in lesson 4 of the series on guitar chords as we continue our study of triads. I hope to see you then. In the meanwhile, thanks for swinging by and studying guitar chords with me. Now, if you found this helpful, please like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, take care. Bye-bye.